Good afternoon. I would like to welcome everybody to the Dune research presentations. We have a very exciting hour and a bit for you. And we also welcome our audience on Zoom. We're live streaming this as well. And I would like to also invite our audience on Zoom to feel free to ask questions as well. We have somebody monitoring the chat. So you can ask questions at any time, and when we have the question period after each presentation, we'll have those questions also coming out. And in the audience here, maybe don't call out your questions immediately in the moment, but do feel free to ask questions after each presentation. I'm Professor Deanna Van Dyke in the Department of Geology, Geography, and Environment, so I welcome you on behalf of the department. And I would also like to mention that the presentations that you're seeing are coming out of the first year Research in Earth Sciences program. So we have a number of students in the course this semester, and they have also been guided by upper level students who have been FIRES research mentors for them this semester. And so you're seeing the results of their group research in these presentations. Each presentation is about 10 minutes in length. And then we'll have some time for questions after each presentation. And then while we do the transition to getting the next PowerPoint up, everybody will be invited to stretch between the presentations. Each group who is presenting will introduce their title and they will introduce themselves. And so I'd like to invite our first group to come up to the front. You've got your PowerPoint loaded already. And we have a nice mix of topics that we'll be going through today. So please do enjoy learning about different aspects of the Lake Michigan dunes. For this first topic, you're going to be hearing about a really interesting thistle. Let's welcome the first.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Tahe. I'm Anna Hudson. I'm Rosario Martinez, and today we are here to talk about the effect of herbivory and deer on pitcher thistle on dunes in Rocky Mountain Natural Area. So like Sahe said, our main focus of this study is pitcher's thistle, or Cirsium pitcheri, which we have pictured here on the left. And this is a threatened species that is native to the Great Lakes region here in Michigan. Herbivory is the feeding on living plant parts by insects or animals. And it has become a concern for a lot of people recently, as it has become a lot more common in our parks. White-tailed deer are one of the biggest causes of herbivory. And when white-tailed deer browse these plants, they can cause a reduction in plant root mass and negatively impact survival of this species. Cirsium pitcheri is a very important population to our dunes, as it's a crucial part of the dune environment and ecosystem, and it also helps in stabilizing the dune. So for our project, we decided to investigate the relationship between herbivory and pitcher's thistle in a specific Michigan coastal dune environment, as well as collecting evidence of deer.
Our research question is, are deer a threat to C. pitcheri's population, with our study objective being collecting data on C. pitcheri, recording evidence of herbivory to C. pitcheri, and recording evidence of deer presence and comparing it to browsing in that area.
So all of our data collection took place in Rocky Mountain Natural Area in Grand Haven, Michigan, which, as you can see, is right along Lake Michigan here in the park. And if you're looking at an overview of the park here, this is where our main blowout was, which is also the one pictured here. And then we also were investigating other pitcher's thistle plants in this area, as well as in a separate blowout that's slightly cut off here. And we decided to focus on this blowout as the population of pitcher's thistle here was the most dense. And this blowout that we studied here was right along the south trail to the beach.
To conduct this research, we identified each pitcher's thistle with flags, and we put their information on the GIS. The information included plant width, height, life stage, and plant vitality. And we also found evidence of deer, such as hoof prints, deer trails, and deer droppings, and we also put them in the GIS. According to our data, juveniles and dead with no flowering were the most common life stages, with only a difference of 2 pitcher's thistles.
These two pictures show juvenile pitcher's thistle.
C. pitcheri is seen distributed east of Lake Michigan with various C. pitcheri age and C. pitcheri damage in both blowouts and outside of the blowouts. As seen in both blowouts, it is seen distributed going windward of both blowouts, but mainly in our main focus blowout seen in the large picture right here. And as you can see in our main focus blowout, it contains more C. pitcheri compared to the outside of the blowouts and the top right corner of the blowout.
Most common pitcher's thistle conditions were between unhealthy and healthy, with only a difference of 4. So we can conclude that majority of the plant conditions are moderately healthy. This is a picture of a very unhealthy pitcher's thistle. As you can see, the leaves have been weathered. In contrast to that, this is a very healthy pitcher's thistles with vibrant green. Lastly, we have the results of herbivory damage. As you can see with this obvious peak, 64% of our collected data were left undamaged. But we also found some damaged pitcher's thistles, especially deer browsing. These pictures show deer browsing due to its severed leaves, and we only found 18% of it.
As seen in the map, the yellow lines indicate deer trail and the black triangles indicate right over here, the black triangle indicates deer dropping and is seen in both blowouts and as well as outside of the blowout. And similar to prior results, deer activity is seen mainly in our focus blowout right over here in the large picture. As a result of a substantial amount of juvenile C. pitcheri, we can use the data collected to show the effect of herbivory. We have found that deer may be the cause of herbivory damage due to the evidence of grazing. Similar to MON-MA, as we collect data of C. pitcheri herbivory, we have found severed portions of the leaves and deer activity near C. pitcheri, which led us to believe deers as a cause of herbivory damage. With the results we have gathered, we advise future research on deer trampling on C. pitcheri due to the abundant evidence of deer activity such as deer trail and deer drop. We asked, are deer a threat to the C. pitcheri population, and have concluded a moderately healthy population of C. pitcheri and deers to be a potential damage factor rather than our focus cause.
Here we have our works cited that we used in our research. And for our acknowledgements, we'd first like to thank the Rosie Mound Natural Area authorities for allowing us to do research on their land and permitting us to go off the trails to collect our data. We'd also like to thank Dr. Deanna Van Dyke here at Calvin for her assistance and advice throughout this process. And finally, we'd like to thank our mentor, Liam Kelly, for his assistance in collecting data and assistance in research. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions. Do you have questions for this team? All right, I'm going to try to pass the mic around so that people can hear the questions well. And we have some questions coming in on the from the Zoom audience.
All right, we have a previous student of the class. They said they mapped the pitcher's thistle at Rosie Mound. And they were wondering if you considered accessing those data and to compare how the population has changed over time and what impacts from your data could have changed the population.
Sorry, could you say it one more time?
The first part was, did you consider accessing the data from previous studies to compare how the population has changed over time?
So we didn't really deep study it, but we gave a quick scan over previous studies done in the past. And we have seen mostly an increased population of C. pitcheri, but haven't seen much effect of deer trampling. Instead, last year, there was a study done and have found that deers haven't had a great cause of herbivory damage towards the picture eye. So that's why we kind of investigated our research this year to see if that effect still stayed the same or had more damage.
You just talk loud if you want me to too.
Why don't you ask the question? I'll repeat it.
Okay, how much did you find sea picturing near deer trails versus like far away from deer trails? Did you see a difference in that?
Okay, the question that we have here is how much did you see sea picture near to deer trails or far away from deer trails? Were you seeing some patterns there?
I would say they were largely closer to the deer trails, as you can see in this first blowout here, the one that we have enlarged. All the deer trails, all the yellow lines are the deer trails in that area. And then we did have a polygon over here with the other sea picture recorded plants that was just a whole polygon showing deer activity. It didn't show up on the map, but yeah, there was a lot of deer activity over there, like including trails and other droppings in that area too. And as you can see, there were some that were more isolated from the deer evidence, but overall, I would say, yeah, they were pretty close together.
Yeah, I can just say about, so I have two questions. My first question is, are there any other mammalian herbivores that nip at the pitcher's thistle,
Oh,
other than deer?
we have evidence from insects and unknown cases.
Okay, so maybe a squirrel could nip at it, or woodchucks? I don't know, I'm just asking out of curiosity.
We haven't seen squirrels on the Dune, so we wouldn't assume that the squirrels did it.
And the other question is, I know this pitcher's thistle are adapted for low nutrient environments. That's why they thrive. One reason they thrive, but they still need nitrogen somehow or another. So is it possible that deer droppings might actually help to some degree pitcher's thistle?
Yeah, we didn't specifically investigate that, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And in our research, we did find that some damage, like if some leaves are bitten off, it can actually help the species grow even more, but a significant amount of leaves that have been chopped off can be negative for the health of the plant.
Are there any more questions? Then let's thank this research team. And students in my classes know that stretching is a thing that we do in class. So as we go into this transition, I encourage you to stand up and stretch. And if your stretch happens to look like a pitcher thistle waving the arms, that would be even better.
What happens when you summon something?
All right, one of the hazards of stretching is losing the audience in the process. So as the audience is sitting back down, we're next going to go away from the pitcher's thistle, but still in an environment where we have some interesting plants. And this group will take us out to the beach and talk about those. Let's welcome this next team.
Hi everyone, this is impacts of beach vegetation type on shadow dune development. I'm Luke Koffel.
I'm Matea Dieters. I'm Sarah Wilkerson.
I'm Colin Effman. So this title begs the question of what is a shadow dune? You get the slide for me. And so while we're out on our dune beach, it's a very windy environment, and that causes sand to move back and forth. And when the sand is moving, it gets trapped by objects. And so objects like rack, which is like sticks or logs that are on the beach, and then vegetation, which is what we were studying, will trap the sand and it'll fall and accumulate. And then from there, it kind of forms a mini dune and is shaped by wind. And this is all happening on that dune beach.
Yeah, so as a little history to kind of Hoffmaster and what's kind of going on in that environment. So shadow dunes are really important for dune development. So they cause incipient foredunes, which later can cause straight up foredunes, which are really great and important to a dune ecosystem. It also is really important to acknowledge the recent fall in lake levels. So as you can tell, we were really low for a while, and then we shot up in 2020. So in 2020, the lake levels were really high, and so it swept up on the beach and took away the foredune and a lot of vegetation. And so, but we've been going down. So this is leaving a lot of beach left, and it allows for new rare plants and old plants to come and move in and create shadow dunes and create a whole new ecosystem. So here are the two plants we've studied. We studied American beach grass, Ammophila bigelovata, and sea rocket, Cactella maritima. And so both of these we chose for specific reasons. So Ammophila is taller and leafier, and we chose this because it's very prevalent and very real in all of these ecosystems. And sea rocket because it's actually a new introduction into the ecosystem of Hoffmaster State Park, because as lake levels fall, it's created an optimal environment for sea rocket. So those are the specific reasons we chose each of those.
Okay, so for our study objectives, we had to record the vegetation in the beach area. To investigate the shadow dunes for two vegetation types, and we identified the differences and related variables for American beach grass.
Okay, and so our study area was situated at Hoffmaster State Park in Muskegon, Michigan. And so as Matea previously mentioned, that the receding lake levels caused an increase in beach, which left a lot of bare sand. And there was an opportunity for the vegetation to be moving in because there's less competition with the removal of the plants in previous years.
And like Colin was saying, one of our main objectives for this study was to record beach vegetation. And to do that, we used GPS units. So here's our lovely researcher, and he's going around to each of our plants and recording them one by one. And he's recording location, maturity, type, and whether or not there's presence of shadow dunes. And so we did this with every single plant in the study area, and also recorded the shape of our study area, like did a little outline, and then recorded each of our study points and our shoreline.
Yeah, so another objective we had was to measure the shadow dunes for the two types of plants. So every week we went out and we measured the 10 plants we chose, so 5 sea rocket and 5 Ammophila bigelovata or American beach grass. And we measured the shadow dune characteristics, so height, length, width, or orientation, so south or north, which did change over our weeks, and erosion pins. So we did this every week for 3 weeks, just determining what's going on and how it's working. So another one was to identify differences in related variables. So we wanted to make detailed plant measurements and measure the wind and sand movement each week. So we recorded plant density and percent coverage. So using quadrats, we computed a square meter of what the plant looked like. So we as you can see right here, we measured what kind of plant it was, how much of the plant, and what the density was. And that was to determine kind of how the plants impact the shadow dunes.
We also use sand traps, as you can tell in the middle picture, which is a PVC pipe with a hole cut in it, and it collects sand as it goes across the beach. So we could kind of determine what was going on that week with the wind and all the sand movement. We also use a nearby wind anemometer to determine kind of what's going on with the weather and how that's impacting us.
And then these were the results for our GPS units. And so we found that there was in our study area, 64% American beach grass, 18% sea rocket, and then 18% other. And so this lovely map right here kind of paints the picture really nice. Up here towards the north end of our study area is a denser population of American beach grass. Kind of towards the center is more sea rocket, and then towards the bottom is a more even distribution of all of our vegetation types. We also did notice that on nearly every vegetation or plant that we recorded, there was shadow dune present. And then right here are our study areas. So we picked key locations on our study area to record the shadow dunes there.
Okay, so as mentioned, there were shadow dunes during all 3 of our lab visits. And so our shadow dunes were changing based off of the change in wind speed and the change in wind direction between time periods. And so that created differences in the development. And so our American beach grass, the height of the shadow dune is taller, and it is also longer than the sea rocket. And in opposition, the sea rocket is much wider than the American beach grass. And so we have come to learn that the density and percent coverage of the plants have a effect on the shadow dune's characteristics. And so in the picture, you can see that the American beach grass is much more lengthy. It is more grass, so leaves tend to be more spaced out, which allows for wind to travel through. And in the movement of the wind, the sand is slowed down between the leaves and it causes deposition. And so because of the wider spacing, there's more time for the sand to travel. So the deposition is more gradually slowed. And so the result is for the shadow dune to be longer and taller. Whereas for the sea rocket, the plant is more short and dense because of the branching system of the stems, which results in a quicker deposition of sand, resulting in the shadow dune being underneath rather than adjacent to the plant. Okay, and so in addition, we also came to learn that the shadow dunes form into bean dunes. So each plant, they are individuals, but they tend to grow in clumps. As you can see, there are generally multiple next to each other. And so each plant has its own shadow dunes, but together their shadow dunes form into bean dunes, which result in the formation of 4 dunes when they're together. And so because they are impacted by each other, their characteristics also impact their shadow dunes. So the shadow dune for the sea rocket, as pointed out in the map previously, when they're clumped together, they are generally more long and wider, whereas when they're sea rocket, the clumps result in wider and more of a mound shape of the shadow dune.
Okay, so in conclusion, we found that American beach grass shadow dunes are taller and longer due to the height, and sea rocket shadow dunes are wider due to the plant's greater percentage coverage. And also, as Luke mentioned earlier, there's 64% American beach grass compared to 18% sea rocket. And this year there was no 4 dunes, but American beach grass is mostly the one that's found on the 4 dunes. And this year we got to study a cool new species, sea rocket, which is brand new to the environment. And then these are our acknowledgements and works cited. We'd like to thank the Michigan Space Grant Conservatorium, the Calvin University Department of Geology, Geography and Environment, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and the J. Hoffmaster State Park. I'd also like to big thanks to our professor Deanna Van Dyke and our mentor Lucy Kate for helping us assisting in our data. Yep, anyone have any questions?
Did you find any clumps or any shadow dunes that were made of both sea rocket and beach grass?
Yeah, so we actually did, which is a really interesting thing to study because there were big shadow dunes between both of them. So we tried to specifically pick ones that were separate. But yeah, we did find those.
And it was particularly interesting because you could see characteristics of both of the plants and then how their shadow dunes change when they were together. And so when they were grown together, they were generally wider than on average because the sea rocket plant characteristics, but they weren't always consistently as long as they standardly are for American beaches.
All right, how did you determine where the shadow dune starts from measurement? Was it easy to tell?
So no, it was not easy to tell, right, you guys. But generally they took a lot of practice. But overall we would generally take a step back and generally look at where we could see a change in elevation. And so where there was regular beach, there was generally a slight growing slope, and that's where you could tell where the shadow dune starts and ends.
This question reflects my ignorance. You say that sea rocket is new. Can you give us the backstory a little bit on that newness?
It's not necessarily like new, yeah, a new species is not just dropped, but for the dune environment on Lake Michigan, we are seeing that like for a long time, American beach grass was the top dog, and we're seeing kind of an introduction of a new species that is taking over 18% of the beach, which is a big deal.
I'm curious if you know whether, like, why that's happening, like, is it like a climate change thing or an invasive species thing? Yeah.
Okay, so as we had mentioned, the receding of the lake levels has allowed for there to be less competition between plant species, which means while American beach grass is generally more prevalent, now that there is open space, it hasn't had a time to necessarily develop as much as it has in past years. And so we don't know necessarily why sea rocket was more prone to grow faster than in previous years, but we are suspecting that it's because of the lack of competition. So it has more opportunities, and that is why it's generally showing up.
Yeah, if you look at our study area, you'll see that most sea rocket is in bare sand areas. So it's going and looking for places that come off what really typically isn't, just to be able to create a new environment.
And I'll piggyback on that as well. Sea rocket is a plant that's adapted to that beach environment. So when there were the high water levels, there simply wasn't enough of that beach to have sea rocket. We were seeing scattered plants at that time, but in much smaller quantities. So it's interesting that it can maintain its presence even in years when it's not prevalent. This is just an opportunity to see more of it because of that wider beach. And eventually when a foredune grows, as we expect it will, then the other plants will outcompete sea rocket there. We'll still see it on the beach, but on the beach it also gets eroded away by waves. So it's got adaptation to that type of environment. But we haven't seen a lot of that, let's say, up on top of the wooded dunes or so. So this is a moment to study this, which has been quite interesting to see so much of it, as the team has been saying. And Perhaps we'll have to see what the lake levels do next year to see whether we get a chance to still see it or whether we have to wait another 10 or 15 years to see the next situation like this. Are there any other questions? Let's thank this research team. And for your transitional stretch, I would encourage you to do a stretch such as sand that's moving and encountering a plant and forming a shadow. What is that? I will encourage the live audience to come back to their seats. And we will have our third research team presenting, and we're back to that really interesting thistle. So let's hear a bit more about that. Let's welcome our third research team.
Our research was on the functional habitats of the rare thistle C. pitcheri, or commonly known as pitcher thistle, at an artificial and natural Dune blowout.
I'm Abby. I'm Leah.
And I'm Carl. So, C. pitcheri is a threatened thistle which is endemic to the upper sand dune shorelines of the upper Great Lakes. Though its population around the upper Great Lakes is once continuous, it has since been shattered by habitat has been shattered by anthropogenic activity. So we are seeing C. pitcheri has been suggested that growing it in an artificial environment will help to bolster its populations and safeguard it from the extinction that our activity is threatening.
Our study objectives in this research project were to map and document Cercium pitcheri on North Beach Dune in the Ottawa Front Parks, record the abiotic and biotic conditions on both North Beach Dune and Perseverance Dune, and identify the changes needed to transform the Perseverance Dune blowout here at Kelvin into a viable habitat for Cercium pitcheri. So for our two study locations, over here you can see Perseverance Dune, which is here on campus. And we focused on the blowout right here, which is mostly bare sand. And that's here in Grand Rapids. And then right above Grand Haven is where North Beach Dune is located. And you can see a fence right along here, and that's what we use as our study area barrier. So the area below that fence is where we located all the pitcher thistle plants. And the fences, there's a lot of sand fences that have been put in here to help stabilize the dune, which is most likely part of the reason that it is highly vegetated compared to Perseverance Dune. So for our study methods, we mainly used GPS to map the location of each pitcher thistle plant, and we recorded on the GPS units a variety of details about the plants. The main one that we focused on was the age of each pitcher thistle plants, which you can see here, the seedlings, juveniles, dead with flower, dead without flower, and then flowering, which we didn't find any flowering.
So we determined a seedling to be having leaves that, less than half of the leaves have branches. You can see this one, none of the leaves have branches, this is a very small seedling. And then a juvenile is determined by having more than half of its leaves have branches, but not having flower. And then dead with flower is dead and it has flower. That one's pretty self-explanatory. So here's just a picture of the GPS units that we used, the Trimble GPS units. We also measured the nearest neighbor, which we actually created this rod that we marked with colored sections every 10 centimeters, just so that we didn't have to measure the exact distance between pitcher thistle and its closest neighbor. So we recorded the distance using the colored sections, and we also noted the type of vegetation that was closest to the pitcher thistle. We also used erosion pins to see what was happening with the sand movement. We placed the erosion pins on North Beach Dune near denser populations of pitcher thistle to see what the sand movement near their growth is. And we also placed erosion pins on Perseverance Dune around the blowout. And our final method, we created vegetation transects on both dunes. And we threw quadrats about every 4 meters and recorded the vegetation density, the percent of vegetation cover, and the types of species in each quadrat in order to compare the vegetation between each location.
So here you can see the map of all the pitcher thistle that we surveyed. So the highest age category that we found was juveniles, and the second highest was seedlings. In fact, the majority of the plants there were juveniles, and very few of the plants were dead without flowers. This shows us that there is a high rate of propagation among C. pitcheri at North Beach Dune, which can indicate to us that this is a good habitat to base comparisons at Perseverance Dune. So here you can see our nearest neighbor dune, and our most common nearest neighbor was the dune grass Ammophila regulata, and you can see that they like to grow real close at 110 centimeters, and it became less common as they got farther away. So, comparing the plants at Perseverance Dune to North Beach Dune, we found that dominating North Beach Dune was Ammophila regulata. And although it did grow at Perseverance Dune, the dominant dune grass is instead Elaeus latus. So here is our comparisons of our deposition and our vegetation characteristics at Perseverance Dune and North Beach Dune. And you can see that the difference between deposition is actually very low. In fact, the differences that we see between the two is in vegetation.
And something interesting we noticed about the vegetation and coverage at between Perseverance and North Beach Dune is that on Perseverance Dune, in our transect, we actually found more plants per square meter on Perseverance Dune, but less overall coverage. Which we took this as meaning the plants on Perseverance Dune were smaller compared to North Beach Dune, and a reason for that we discussed probably is because Perseverance Dune is newer than North Beach Dune. And we also noticed on North Beach Dune a large amount of C. pitcheri that had sustained deer damage. And we saw other evidence of deer, such as tracks and droppings, which is how we determined it to be damaged by deer. And we noticed a lot of Cercium pitcheri that had died with flowers, as we saw picture previously of that. That means that it had successfully germinated, as Cercium pitcheri only flowers once before it then dies. And for Perseverance Dune, we determined that the different types of vegetation, their habitats to different types of vegetation, mainly as Carl mentioned, different types of dune grass. And management of vegetation at Perseverance Dune may be necessary to provide a more viable habitat for C. pitcheri.
So the sand movement at both dunes is very similar, which means there is potential for thistle to grow on Perseverance Dune. But due to the difference in vegetation and vegetation cover, we have concluded that Perseverance Dune is currently not best fit for thistle. Perseverance Dune may not have enough American beach grass, as Brown mentioned, because we found that at North Beach Dune, thistle is most likely to be found next to and very close to American beach grass. And there are also plant species on Perseverance Dune that were not on North Beach Dune, so we are unsure if they would affect thistle. For Perseverance Dune to become a viable habitat for thistle, there would need to be a denser population of vegetation and a larger population of American beach grass. More research should probably be done on the top half of North Beach Dune because we didn't have enough time to get to the rest of the dune, and also on a variety of other dunes to see if there are different types of vegetation that thistle grows near.
And we just wanted to thank Ottawa County Parks and Recreation Commission for allowing us to work on North Beach Dune, as well as Calvin University and Deanna Van Dyke and the fire sports. And also, our project would not have been possible without our mentor, Abby Marie.
We have time for some questions. Did you showed that the plants, the pitcher thistle grows very close to the Mothra of Larva. Do you know, did you think of some reasons why that could be?
So one reason is that it could be protecting the pitcher thistle from deer predation, because we did see a number of pitcher thistle that had been eaten by deer.
Yeah, so it could just be that the thistle plants that are closer to Ammophila are less likely to be found by deer, so those are the ones that are growing better, so that could be part of the reason.
We also found some pitcher thistle growing like within Ammophila plants, which could potentially be a form of protection for the species, right?
So on the results slide, you have a measurement as in the number of plants per square meter. So that square meter as in the entire dune system, and if so, how did you measure that, or was that just within the plant clusters?
So this was the average number of plants per square meter, and this was gotten by taking quadrats and randomly dispersing them across the dunes, and then taking the average of then multiplying those in that quadrat by 4 to get a square meter, and then averaging that number. So no, we did not have time to take out the entire dune, but we think this is a pretty good estimate. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question. Can you comment a little bit on the deer damage, since we've heard about that a little bit earlier, but when you were seeing deer damage, was that just a little nibble on the plant, or what was the nature of what you were seeing?
A lot of what we found was the plant was almost completely gone. Like, we had to spend some time identifying the plant. We had some trouble actually determining if it was pitcher thistle at all, because the plant was almost completely gone.
If you can go back to the map for a second, you can see that like most of the like dead ones from the deer damage are over around here, and actually around near the sand fence. When there was deer damage, we found that usually only 1 or 2 leaves was taken.
One more question.
It's the obvious follow-up question. Why so little damage next to the sand fence line as against your site to the left as we see the screen here.
This area was in a blowout, so there was a lot more bare sand than over by the fence line. That, would be the most plausible explanation for that. It could also be right at the top, you see, it's like there's some woods near that blowout. So it could just be that, it's closer access for the deer. But yeah, the bare sand means that it's, easier to find interstitial plants because they're hanging out by themselves.
All right, let's thank this research team. And for your transition stretch, you can stand up and you can leap around like a deer, seeing pitcher thistle in itself. And I will invite the audience to come back to their seats. The Zoom audience can imagine how much leaping around like deer is going on out of view of what you can see. So we're heading into our last presentation of the day, and we've had a lot of focus on vegetation interaction with the sand movement. We've been on the beach, we've been up into some of the higher places in the dunes. Now we have a team that's going to take us into a transition zone of dunes close to the beach. And they're going to introduce the idea of people getting access to seeing some of these really good things. So let's welcome our fourth research team.
Effects of sand movement on beach access at PJ Hoffmaster State Park. I'm TJ.
I'm Clara. I'm Victoria.
And I'm John.
Before we introduce our study, it's important to know some of the science behind sand dune formation and sand movement. Studies show that as wind blows over sand, individual grains of sand are picked up by the wind and blown in the direction that the wind is moving. This is a process called saltation. And usually in coastal environments like we have here, wind comes from the direction of the water and blows inland. So in the presence of structures, this can mean sand builds up around the structures or eventually buries the structures. In our study, a park on the coast of Lake Michigan is looking at implementing a universally accessible wheelchair ramp. And we wanted to study this area and collect data to give back to the park managers and suggest a possible course of action for implementing this wheelchair ramp.
So our study took place at PJ Hoffmaster State Park, which is located right here on the map. Our study took place from October 19th to November 7th.
at two separate locations. Our first location was here at site A. Right here we have the parking lot, and you can't really see the path, but the path goes right here. That leads down the beach, which leads to Lake Michigan. This was our primary study of where seeing the ramp is going to be built. Site A is the main spot where park managers are looking to consider implementing a universally accessible ramp. Our second primary study, or our second study, was done at site B, which is closest to the visitor center. Site B experienced a lot more sand deposition compared to site A, and almost the entire boardwalk at site B is covered. We studied site A primarily, but we also studied site B to compare with site A and see if there was comparable sand accumulation. There was a similar study done by Mohammed E, where two areas in the western desert of Egypt were studied. One area had a little bit of sand deposition, which we experienced at site A, and another area which experienced a lot of sand deposition, which we experienced at site B.
Our research question was, how is sand moving around the beach access path between site A compared to the boardwalk at site B at PJ Hoffmaster State Park? And our objectives were to identify the sand movement and the patterns, map the evidence and features, and compare the activity between the two sites.
So in order to answer our research question, we used erosion pins to measure deposition at both of our areas to see how active they were. So on the bottom right, you can see two members of our team using erosion pins to collect data. We also used sand traps to collect the grains of sand that the wind blew towards the structures. And on the left, that's a picture of a sand trap in one of our areas. The data was used to compare the amounts of sand that blew towards our observed areas so that we could fully understand how large or small the difference in sand accumulation was between sites A and B. The ground covers such as leaf litter and dune beach grass, as well as dune features, were mapped using Trimble TD 650s. And in the top right corner, that's a member of our team using one of those devices. And thanks to that device, we observed that in areas where we saw extreme leaf litter and vegetation, such as site A, it was evident that both these variables were indicators of little sand deposition. The specific locations of each erosion pin and sand trap are also mapped, and this allows us to see where the places of most deposition were located, so we could accurately compare site A and B.
In this graph, we can see that site B, which is an active blowout, had significantly more sand movement compared to site A, which is a forested dune ridge, and it had 35 times more measured by sand trap. And in this graph, the positive numbers represent deposition and the negative numbers represent erosion. And at site A, where the new ramp might be built, mostly experience deposition during the windier periods of weeks 2 and 3. And at site B, we can see that there was overall more deposition in week 1, and overall in week 2, there was more erosion. Here we can see that at site A, where the existing path is, there is already sand burial, like seen at site B. And site A, we can see that there's only a little bit of sand burial, whereas at site B, those railings are about waist height. So that just shows how much sand burial there is at site B. And here we can see that site A is a forested dune ridge and site B is an active blowout.
So it makes sense that we see more sand movement at site B, because site B, being an active blowout, has no protection from the wind coming from the shore. It acts as like a funnel for the wind, and wind is what controls sand movement. So we see much more sand movement over here. And site A, the forested dune ridge, has much more vegetation and trees. The path goes this way, pretty much parallel to the beach. So there's a line of trees protecting it from the wind, so we see much less sand movement in that area. We don't know exactly how much sand has covered each of the ramps since their installation. We dug holes at both of the sites, and Site B definitely had more deposition than Site A. There was also an unexpected result with our erosion pins. Some of them, actually a fair number of them, measured erosion the first week and then deposition the next week, which we wouldn't normally expect. Usually you would see erosion both weeks in a single location, but we expect this could be due to rain during the first week and then a dry, windier period causing deposition the second week.
Our study found that at PJ Hall Francis State Park, more sand movement, there was more sand movement at Site B near Visitor Center than at Site A by our day use path. So we conclude that due to less activity at Site A than B, it would be feasible location at Site A for an accessible path. Here are our works cited and acknowledgements.
Thank you.
We have time for some questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm curious if, as you were researching this topic, if you happen to come across a threshold for the maximum degree of slope that would be suitable for this proposed ramp, if you were happen to know that value or a range of what that should be. I'm curious to know that. And I'm also curious, did you collect any data that you did not end up using, but you still collected it anyway?
First question, are you referring to vertical or horizontal slope? Like vertical slope or slope corresponding to beach?
I guess like, yeah, how
Vertical
steep
slope
should it
study.
be? Yeah.
We did not look into that, so I don't have an answer for you there, but there was some data we did not use. Could you go back to the one of the graphs? So I forgot to mention, but we looked at our data from the second week, which was windy and dry, to draw most of our conclusions, because we saw some unexpected, I mentioned erosion 1 week and deposition next week. So we avoided that data we didn't avoid it, but we drew our conclusions from the second week and left out that because we can make patterns with that.
Do you think the amount of sand movement is a determining or disqualifying feature for where they want to put the ramp? Like, does the amount of sand movement on site be automatically disqualify it?
I believe the case is that Hoffmeister is looking at putting in this ramp at Site A. They've already determined that they want it in that area. So we were just looking to see if a similar thing would happen at Site A as has already happened with the ramp at Site B. But yes, if there was too much sand movement, I think that would disqualify it as an option.
Are there any other questions? Then let's thank this research team in particular for their and all of the teams will be around for a bit after these presentations. So if you have more specific questions, you should feel free to come up and talk to them. I'd like to thank the audience for asking good questions, for handing the mic around so helpfully. I'd like to thank the Zoom audience as well for joining us. And if people are around on campus next week, Thursday, the Sustainability Showcase that's in the Chapel Undercroft with a lecture at 4 p.m. and a poster session at 5 p.m. The 5 p.m. poster session has posters by these research teams as well. So you can come and ask those questions you didn't think about this week, but they've been keeping you awake all at night for the next week. You've got another opportunity to ask people those questions. Thank you all.